He is the founder and leader of Hakim Nasser Khosrau committee or association in Afghanistan, and he's also the leader of Ismailiyas in Afghanistan. Well, his message is 3 pages, and I'm not asked to read it, only that he is also a victim of this victim in this case, and his 2 brothers were also murdered. So that's why he has written this message. We thank him a lot for sending this message, and as he has asked, we ask all Afghans to support this case and to bring those who committed the crimes in justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now it's the time for discussion. I've had some questions from different people, but it's not possible. I think I ask the questions myself. It's better that people do it. But we will start with, I will start with posing a question to each of the 3 speakers, and then afterwards you can ask your own questions. And I'd like to start with Mrs. Kufo, and one of the questions was, oh no, it's the wrong one. Yeah, maybe I will ask the question. If I don't do it okay, then the person who told me that he wants to ask these questions, he can also add to it. But the question is, what do you expect from reconciliation? Yeah, what kind of achievements do you expect from it, and what does it include? Did I ask it okay? I don't remember. It was, I think, Mr. Shams? Yeah?
Yes.
Was it rightly?
It was right partially. I'd like to add part of the question I'd like to elaborate on. The reconciliation, do you expect the victims with the criminals to reconcile with each other? Or do you expect from that the reconciliation process something to get out of it or to reach something? What's your intention of using reconciliation process?
It's a very, very good question. And if we talk about what's so far happening when it comes to the sort of more formal reintegration or reconciliation programs in Afghanistan, I mean, one could spend quite a long time talking about them. But personally, I don't expect anything from them as long as they ignore some of the issues that we've heard about here today. As long as there is not a clear victims focus and not a clear focus on trying to really work with the grievances in Afghan society. Because the way I see many of the more formal processes today is that they've been processes to try to get people to stop fighting and getting people to lay down their arms. This is very important. But in the long run, it won't work as a peace process, and it won't work as a reconciliation process if victims are not involved, and if victims are not there to sort of phrase their demands for justice and tell their stories. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you. Yeah, you have more to ask about this?
Probably you can elaborate a bit the general pardon which the criminals was announced, and they forgive each other.
Yeah,
what do you think of that?
I think it's very important to raise. I mean, that point is very important to raise, and that hasn't been raised forcefully here today. Afghanistan has today an amnesty law in place, an amnesty law that was developed by Afghan parliamentarians and that is now law in force in Afghanistan. It's probably a law that would not hold up to scrutiny under international law. It's a law that would no longer be approved when it under international law. But there's no way of challenging that Afghan amnesty law because there's no real way of having a sort of challenging that law within the Afghan justice system. So the only way to challenge that law is to have kind of things that you are doing in the Netherlands, and also the fact that the victims continue to raise these issues, because that option is still open in the amnesty law as well.
If I may add, the Afghan amnesty law doesn't stand in the way of Dutch prosecution.
Nor for the International Criminal Court.
To Patricia, but also to Thijs or Bert, about what do we understand by hard documentation for prosecuting people? And I think the first one, it was from Mr. Jacob.
Yes, I would like to add some information about it.
Yes.
You were talking about hard documentation, which is needed to prosecute the people who are doing these kinds of things. Like we have the list of 5,000. What about the US and the NATO that drone people, the innocent civilians in Afghanistan? And I'm not only talking about Afghanistan. I'm talking about Yemen, Pakistan, Libya. There's hard documentation about this. What is the Federation of Afghan Refugee Organizations in Europe doing about this? Or do you have plans to do something about this? Because there is really hard documentation. There's evidence that the United States and the NATO is droning innocent civilians, children. So what's your opinion about this? Is there some kind of plan you would like to implement to take care of this?
Well, I don't speak for the Federation of Afghan Refugee Organizations. So I can't really say what they plan to do. Certainly those are, I know a number of human rights organizations have documented these incidents as well. I don't know this stage, I mean, I don't know quite what you're asking, whether those should be prosecuted or whether they are being prosecuted.
Yeah.
Both
are they
those?
prosecuted or should they be prosecuted?
I don't know right now of any. Certainly the cases have, people have raised these as very serious human rights violations in a number of cases. I don't know at the moment if anyone is seeking, or whether there's an interest among the Afghan community. That would be for them to decide whether they're going to seek this. But if you look at the reports done, these are fairly, a number of them, say, unlike some of the cases we're talking about, they've been fairly well documented, and you're exactly right. These are very serious, in some cases, they're very serious concerns about respect for the laws of war, respect for human rights, and carrying these out. So I think that the documentation in many of those cases is being collected now. So there's, because now as opposed to 78, 79, there are more eyes on the ground looking at some of these cases, so there's better documentation. So it's possible some of these will, it's very difficult to prosecute some of these, but there's more documentation available. Whereas 78, 79 period, our problem is we don't have journalists on the ground investigating, we don't have human rights organizations that were on the ground investigating disappearances. We have to go back now and reconstruct those events. This is kind of the difference between the two categories.
Yeah, but I think there's a list being composed right now, and I think when about 10 years from now, we will have the same seminar, maybe not in The Hague, but we're talking about 2010 till 2014, and we have a list of 2,500 people who are dying. So if someone doesn't implement a plan, which is happening right now in Afghanistan,
You're right, I think pressure has
this
to come from
cycle
the
is just
victims.
the vicious cycle, and it will go on.
Always need the pressure from the victims, from the families, from the communities to bring the pressure on to bear on those responsible, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's clear. Some of the questions are about the Afghan death list, and it's to Mr. Berger, I should say. Can you elaborate on the possibility that there are more death lists of the same periods, and what does the Dutch prosecutor do about this? The question is from Jip van Dort.
Of course, we have indications that there are more lists amounting to approximately 12,000 victims. It's been mentioned in open source material. We haven't been actively looking for those lists because as a national prosecutor in the Netherlands, I have to look into cases that fall within my own jurisdiction. So usually if it concerns crimes that have been committed in Afghanistan, I have to look at a certain suspect, a certain person who falls within my jurisdiction, who was involved in those crimes. We had such a person, and he died in 2012. So I didn't have any formal reason, formal grounds for conducting investigations in those other lists. Of course, from a broader perspective, these are very, very interesting.
Thank you. And I think you had a second question. Could you say a few more words about the possibility the death hits lists give to the prosecutor to prosecute the perpetrators in the Netherlands of the war crimes in the years 78 and 79? Maybe the person can ask it themselves.
Hi,
It's
I'm
better.
Jan van Doort from the Socialist Party, the SP here in The Hague. Many people mentioned that the fact that the lists are now there, about 5,000 names, should give rise to new possibilities to prosecute Afghans in the Netherlands that perpetrated these war crimes. So, since you have experience with this, do you have any indication it's possible that more people could be prosecuted in the Netherlands? Well, of course, this is one famous example, but we died too soon for the prosecution to finish. So if you could elaborate on that.
I can only give you a very general answer because as a prosecutor, I'm not used to share information about pending or future investigations because that would only harm my investigations. So I can only say that these lists and the transport orders might help future investigations. They might.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any more questions maybe about this list?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Homa Said and I've come along with the speakers from Belgium. I am from Afghanistan. I'm a researcher on transitional justice, currently working on my doctorate degree at Leuven University. And I also come from a family that has had many losses as a result of decades of conflict in Afghanistan. So, first of all, I would like to thank everyone, the organizers, for organizing this wonderful opportunity. And I would like to thank especially the Dutch government for releasing the list because I think it really broke this opportunity that brought so many, as what I call it, as it was like a social earthquake among Afghans. In Afghanistan or Afghans anywhere, if you follow Facebook or some social networks that I followed in the reflections that I saw. And this today is just one example. So I really hope that this is only one opening. And we Afghans living abroad feel the responsibility and our commitment towards what it is that we can do. There's so much that Afghans in Afghanistan cannot do. But Afghans abroad have the privilege. If we enjoy all the privileges of living in this society, I think this is one of them. And we should, if we have a responsibility towards our country, our people, our own families, our own maybe selves for what we have gone through, I think we have an opportunity to contribute and collaborate, and I hope that this would be only an opening. And related to that, what I would like to ask Mr. Berger, it came up in the brief conversation I had with you, but I would like you to tell us a little bit more specifically what it is, the kind of information that you're looking for exactly, what counts as solid basis for information or sound and solid evidence that you were looking for. Since you mentioned that this part is quite crucial to the continuation of this investigation, that I hope it will not stop. And also another brief question, why there are so many criminals here in the Netherlands especially, I think. Is there any way to stop more of them coming from Afghanistan because we have many of them, unfortunately.
Before you answer, did everybody hear the question? Yes?
Well, first off, my task is limited to investigation and prosecution. So I cannot give you any reasons or cannot elaborate on why there are, as you say, so many after-war criminals in the Netherlands. Regarding investigation and prosecution, it's a very good question you ask. What kind of information do you need then for starting an investigation? Well, first off, again, we need information on crimes that fall within my jurisdiction. So that already limits the relevance of the information. It needs to be information, roughly speaking, when we talk about crimes committed in Afghanistan, it needs to be information that concerns perpetrators residing in the Netherlands. That's first off. And then when you talk about the nature of such information, for us to start an investigation, we have limited resources, so we always have to juggle and see where we have to choose between different cases. We're not only looking at cases, crimes committed in Afghanistan, but also committed in other countries as well. So we constantly have to choose. So it needs to be preferably as strong as possible, meaning that it should be as direct as possible. Eyewitness testimony, for example, but preferably documentary evidence, meaning documents, authentic documents from the time, preferably, just like the transport orders work, and originals, not only copies, because originals we can put to forensic tests, like we did with the transport orders. They were put to the test by the Dutch National Forensic Institute. We could authenticate them. So that's in short the kind of information that we are really looking for.
Can you also just please say about the protection part that you mentioned before?
Of course we can.
Can you repeat the question? Because maybe not everybody heard it.
Well, earlier it came up something about the protection because probably there are some people who are concerned about their safety and security, and Mr. Berger mentioned that they do have measures, so I just wanted that for everyone to know about that.
In our kind of cases, being in, whether they're in Afghanistan or in other countries, in countries where there's an ongoing conflict, witnesses aren't always as keen on talking to us because of understandable fear of their own safety. And that is something that we take very seriously. I don't think any criminal case is more important than the safety of the witness. So that's something we take very seriously and try to work with. And there are certain measures that we can take. Of course, it's very difficult for us to offer protection in Afghanistan. It's very difficult. But we can also think of finding ways of using information without putting the person that is the source out in the limelight. But it's, in short, we are aware of such risks and we are open to talk about them. Take them seriously, and we always look for possibilities of diminishing such risks.
Okay, can I ask you a question? You can ask a question.
I have a question for Mr. Berger, but allow me please to put it in a correct framework and context. In the years I was in Afghanistan, I followed some process against Mr. Sherwin, who is accused for thousands of deaths and disappearances and torture of Afghans. I interviewed him in his comfortable prison cell in Kabul. He is prosecuted by an incompetent court, by incapable prosecutor. He is a student of law in the evening hours. And he has been charged for a very inadequate crimes, misusing of his responsibilities during the duty. In light of the political developments in Afghanistan, I see the chance to prosecute him in Afghanistan declining by the day. As you see this year, the withdrawal of the international community and militaries. I suggest that the Dutch government, in continuation of their involvement in Afghanistan, bring this prominent human rights violator to The Hague and prosecute him here. In the past years, the Dutch police and justice developed a certain expertise and set up a competent team to prosecute a few war criminals in Holland. What do you think? How realistic is this wish?
In general terms, I'm familiar with the case and the way it's being conducted in Afghanistan. I'm terribly sorry, but I have to leave you with a very formal answer. And that is that he's outside of my jurisdiction.
Because?
He's not residing in the Netherlands. He's not a Dutch national, and the crimes were not committed in the Netherlands or against Dutch nationals. So he falls outside of my jurisdiction.
Yeah. It is a formal answer, but I put it in a way Holland, the Dutch government is involved in Afghanistan since 10 years. But is that not in line of the Dutch government's involvement in Afghanistan to do something on the way of respecting human rights and prosecute human rights violators, either in Holland, either in Afghanistan, to support and to assistance the Afghan judicial system?
As it is now, the case being prosecuted in Afghanistan by Afghan authorities, it's up to them to decide how to move forward, and they have apparently chosen to prosecute them in Afghanistan. So it's not up to me to...
Excuse me, what about Milosevic?
She was like many Africans.
So he was not
That's, he fell within another jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of the International Court for Yugoslavia. And they have a very different jurisdiction than I have.
He wasn't in that
It was an international court.
That's the difference. Yes?
As one of victims, I think that justice in our own hands. We should try to get it. And in the Netherlands, we have a luxury that the government of the Netherlands is very motivated and is active and has tried some war criminals in the Netherlands. And we hope that after the publication of the list, I think that the moral responsibility for the Dutch government is much higher than what before the case was. All victims from around the world look to the Dutch government to prosecute at least the criminals who are living in the Netherlands, and that Dutch government use all its influence and power to get our message to the European Union, because it should be European, otherwise it will be the case of some criminals who have not get a residence in the Netherlands and they have gone to Belgium or some other countries. But if Europe tries to bring these people to justice together, then they have to leave Europe or be convicted for the crimes that they have done. One of the messages from Canada was also pointing to another point, to founding an international research and investigation center for Afghan criminals, Afghan war criminals, and perpetrators of human rights in Afghanistan who are living outside or inside Afghanistan. I think that this is a good idea, and if the Dutch government, as the front runner in this case, takes the initiative and the opportunity to share its experience and to bring to start with founding such a international investigation center, it will be a very good opportunity for us. I don't know if it is possible, and as you see it as an official of the Dutch government. Thank you.
Thank you for your suggestion. I think it's difficult for you to answer. Well, it's not really a question, but it's an opinion, vision on it. I just ask, is there maybe a question for Mrs. Cosby? Yeah?
Yeah, Ms. Gosper, there seems to be an abundance of people willing to testify, and Afghans are speaking out all over the world because of this issue, but it never gets picked up by international media. It's not as hip as other war conflicts, because you've researched this. Why do you think that is?
Is the question clear?
Why isn't this issue of the victims from this period, why is that not, well, media is always fickle. Whatever is hot for the moment, then it fades away. I mean, I think briefly when the list came out last fall, there was some attention to it.
Yeah, but it wasn't as big as I expected, to be honest.
I don't know why that is, but unfortunately I think media interest in the conflict in Afghanistan is also waning, and they're looking for other issues to cover. But I don't think that should be a deterrent to those who want to see this pursued. I think quite the contrary. You should seize the moment that exists to make the most of it, and maybe create other media opportunities around it. And I think think of this 5,000, as I said when I spoke, as the only that it's so much bigger than that, and so little has been done really trying to focus on the enormity of what happened, particularly in the early years of the war, or as was pointed out earlier, that the fact that these violations have continued. I mean, one of the great tragedies of Afghanistan is every different period of the war brought a new range of human rights violations, a new regime in power, but again, these cycles continue, even continuing to this very day, and that is going to be very difficult to ever break if this kind of culture, what we call the culture of impunity, that no one is ever prosecuted for these crimes, regardless if they are with the PDPA or the militias, Mujahideen, or the Taliban, or you say the Americans and the current Afghan government, and no one's ever prosecuted for these crimes. How will they ever cease, and how will the victims ever get justice?
One last question to Mrs. Kufo, the speaker the first speaker of today. Yes?
Is there any investigation center for Afghanistan around the world, especially in Netherlands? If not, why? And what is the difference between Afghanistan and other countries? If we see in the news, there are criminals from Africa, they bring here to Netherlands and they judge them. But about Afghanistan, nothing happened. And there is no investigation center. If one victim wants to give some document, where should we go? And is there any plan to cooperate with Afghan refugees here, those who busy with this business?
Is it a question? Yeah? Maybe you can tell everybody what the question is, because I don't think everybody...
Let's take the answer.
Yes?
As we know that this list was given to the United Nations Commissioner Felix Armaco long before. Why till now, till the person got dead or killed or whatever, then the list is published? Why not before? This list was there for tens of years. Why he didn't act before? Why act now? Is there any conspiracy theory or anything that we should know about?
A good question. Can you answer that?
Well, there's always conspiracy theories. I mean, there's a couple of important points that's come up here. One is this issue of why has it been so difficult to get interest for the violations that have happened in Afghanistan? And I think part of the reason for that is that the Afghan conflict is so complicated and has been going on for such a long time. So it really takes quite a lot of communication, and part of that communication can actually also come from the side of the organizations like the Federation here today, to really sort of bring the victim stories to life, to again mobilize, to again sort of engage international governments and also international media on human rights issues in Afghanistan, past and present. I think that's important. Afghanistan is complicated. One shouldn't simplify it, but one should find ways to actually communicating what matters. I think some issues have been raised that relates to the amnesty law and the difficulties of persecutions inside Afghanistan, and I know there's definitely a lot of pressure on the Dutch government right now, but I wanted to also raise that the International Criminal Court, that's also residing in The Hague, has actually had preliminary analysis ongoing on Afghanistan for 4 years now, for about 4 years now? Yeah, 7 years now. And the International Criminal Court does collect information on the period that you raised, sort of post-2003 till today. But it's sort of, I know that they've moved quite forward on sort of getting an overview of the crimes during that period, but there's no real decision on prosecutions yet. On the question on documentation centers, I think, do you want to come in on that one a little bit? Would it be...
Well, there's a Afghanistan documentation project that was started that's now housed at American University's College of Law. But this is a collection of all the existing documentation, UN, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission, although not the conflict mapping report because that isn't public. All these, even some of the reports that the UN did a mapping report which wasn't published by the UN but is available. These have been coded so that you can use the database at this project to search for, on the basis of certain patterns of crimes, in certain individuals if they're named, regions, years, etc. So it's just afghan.project.org. So it is already publicly available information, but all pulled together in one place on a searchable database. So I do recommend you, if you're interested in that, you can look at that website.